And it is my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Jeff Kura from Massey University with us today. Jeff has been involved with ANA's latest resource that you will all be familiar with. We're very proud of the collaboration that's occurred putting this resource together, Kawea Aotearoa. And Dr. Jeff Kura is going to today provide an insight and an overview of food security issues in Aotearoa. This is fundamental to the first paper in our series, and it underpins our whole document. Jeff will provide a review of some of the sustainable and innovative responses that we are already seeing in food security, and he'll discuss different possible approaches by communities and governments towards greater food security. The pyramid or upside down triangle that is depicted in these documents that I've shared on my screen was purposefully developed, and this was as a result of Jeff's input into these documents. Jeff was involved in the very early days advising us, and one of the things that sticks in my mind is that Jeff said, if you actually get the fundamentals right, then you won't need to be talking about the micro or macronutrients, and hence thanking Jeff very much for his input into the document and to help us to get our heads around real food security and its real meaningful, how this has really had a great meaning for putting these papers together and developing our further work and thinking around the future of nutrition for Aotearoa. Kia ora to you, Jeff, and we look forward to having the next half hour for you to share your skills, your wisdom, and your worldview with us. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome.
Kia ora, Alison. Nā koutou, everyone. I'll just share my screen if you don't mind. Yep, I can do that now. All right. Thank you so much, Alison. I'd like to actually extend thanks to ANA and Alison for leading Kawea Aotearoa, especially the work that's been done by Sally and Leanne. Just fantastic work. It was unfortunately I couldn't contribute as much as I would have liked, but certainly it's a great amount of work being done there, and it's a real crucial resource in terms of nutrition. I'll just move on to the next. I'll just do a quick mihi. Actually, I'll just go back one. A quick mihi. Ko whakarara te maunga, te warere te awa, he haere tonu rā ki kiripaka, putu atu ki te moana, ko matatua te waka, ko ngā tūpanga o te hapu, ko ngā tūpanga o te whare, ko opu nui te pā, ko marawhiti te marae I mua, ko Jeff Kura taku ingoa, he kairangahau hauora Māori ki te kuninga ki Pūrehu roa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. So I just thought I'd quickly talk a little about myself, because you might not fully know where I've come from and why food is such an interest for me. And I actually have a background in exercise physiology. So what the heck am I doing in food security is a question. But just in my background, I hopefully will be able to explain it. I was raised in Kaikohe, born in Kaio Hospital when they had a hospital, and Kaikohe is not known for its wealth. Unfortunately, it's wealth of people, but unfortunately, wealth of assets and monetary resources is pretty low. And it was a big issue for me as growing up. I didn't actually realize we were poor because we were always in the garden. We always had food on the table. So even though both my parents were unemployed, we still were able to, they had the resilience and the skills and the necessary knowledge to be able to provide us with kai. This is a map of the far north, or Te Tai Tokorau, and you can see the dark purple areas is areas of high deprivation. The blue in the square there is where I used to live, and that's about the right now. Its deprivation level is about at the 12th percent of the highest deprivation in New Zealand. So it's still in the area of being very low socioeconomic. I've got a doctorate in public health. My area is across the board. Basically, I started off in schools. Project Energize was my work and was my study. So I worked across nutrition, physical activity, and sleep. My work now is actually finding solutions in equity. So being able to have equity as a focus and working across the fields of nutrition, physical activity, and sleep to be able to ensure that people have the health outcomes that they deserve. In terms of food security, the FAO, it's the UN's leading agency in terms of food security, and their definition is the lack of, this is food insecurity, by the way, the lack of regular access to enough safe and nutritious food for normal growth and development and an active, healthy life. They have a measurement called the FEAS, or the Food Insecurity Experience Scale, and it goes from fully food secure all the way through to severely food insecure. New Zealand Ministry of Health use this particular food security definition. So it's a limited or uncertain availability of nutritionally adequate and safe foods, or limited ability to acquire personally acceptable foods that meet cultural needs in a socially acceptable way. So there's, dependent on your definition of food security, it changes the proportion or the prevalence of food security in your population. So just be aware that that when we see these measures, these numbers that come out about who is food secure and who is food insecure, it's dependent on the kind of definition that you follow. So in New Zealand, based on this definition, we have 3 in 5 children live in households that do not report any experience of food insecurity. So that means that 2 in 5 children do live in a household that report food insecurity. So more from that particular work collected from the 2019 publication of children's food insecurity, and the for Māori, there were over 1 in 3 children were food insecure. For those children that lived in a household with a gross income less than $50,000, 68% of them, or 67.9% of them, lived in a household with that low household income. And the largest number of children lived in the most deprived neighborhoods, quintile 5, and that's about 44%, made up about 44% of all children who are food insecure. Notice that even in quintiles 1 and 2, those higher, or those supposedly wealthy households, there were 19.6%, they made up 19.6% of all food insecure households. So it's spread right across deprivation. I just wanted to give a quick history of food security in Aotearoa, and particularly from a Māori perspective. When the whalers first started arriving around 1790, Māori were feeding them based on their massive gardens that they had, and also mahinga kai. So this is the places where you would traditionally go to be able to hunt and gather food. So there was an agrarian society, but also hunter-gatherer too. After the signing of the treaty in around 1860, there was a massive land grab all the way through to the 1930s, and there was massive land loss, and also that access to that mahinga kai, those natural or those traditional hunting and gathering grounds were lost to a large part, and so that started adding to the food insecurity for Māori. At this time, there was a massive drop in population, both through disease, war, and also famine. And so those three things added to the population dropping by about 50%, Māori population. Then there was urban drift from between 1936 to 1986. There was a drop in rural Māori, was 83% at 1936, and in 1986 there was 83% Māori in urban spaces. So there was a fast, massive drift of population from rural into urban areas. The problem with that was there were actually not enough jobs, or there was discrimination for employment, and so therefore employment plus poverty led to more food insecurity. We had our first national food security survey in 1997, and then the Enhanced project between 2007 and 2009, which looked at food security and also physical activity for New Zealand. So this is drawn from, this particular graph is drawn from work that Informers have done. And so it's our friend Sally, she has contributed to this work. You can see here that the food systems and nutrition strategy and people's capacity are part of the foundation to lead to infrastructure actions and healthier food environments, and hopefully will lead to environmental sustainability and economic prosperity, improved health and increased equity. So that's what we're aiming for, that bottom layer. Hopefully the mechanisms within between those two places will be able to provide us with that. What I would like to add to that model is actually a perspective of Mātauranga Māori. So this is bounded by Western thinking, and that Mātauranga Māori can actually add a new dimension to this to be able to have different ways of approaching food insecurity. It also doesn't add in people's capability. So we have people's capacity there. It has sufficient income there, but I'm thinking about people's capability in terms of being innovative. Where we have our social cohesion, we have our social mores that might be able to help us to be able to step forward and out of a box type thinking, and more broadly. We also need to think about the complementary food system. Now, this is the name that I've made up, so you won't have heard of this before. What I'm trying to talk about here is a food system that provides food for communities that is outside our conventional food system of supermarkets, restaurants, and fast food outlets. So it's outside what we would normally see as being our food system, and something different. So it could be a food rescue, it could be community gardens, it could be Eat My Lunch. This particularly graph is from Signal et al, and they talked about food security being the wicked problem, and it certainly is a wicked problem. It is very complex, very difficult to assess, very difficult to address. So in this particular graph, we have some things that Signal and others talk about being control parameters, things that are the main points that we need to target, some touch points that we need to address. And those being money available in the household, so whatever impacts on that. So it could be wages, minimum wage. It could be healthy food subsidies. We could get, GST taken off food, for example. It could be employment, or it could be getting full benefits for their entitlements from, say, WINS. There are food purchasing influences, so things like advertising. If the household is getting food from another source, so it could be mahinga kai, as we talked about before, because there are still some that are still available and people go and gather their food there. It could be the advertising from food industry that could be influencing people's purchasing. And then the main one for food security is the cost of healthy food. So price is a big factor. It's not the only factor, but it's a big factor. And then therefore all those influences that are affecting that are things that we need to consider when we're looking at intervening or making changes to policy. So the kind of interventions that they recommended were under those control parameters of money available in the household, food purchasing influences, and the cost of food. And so all these list of subpoints here are things that they recommended could be useful to be able to intervene. Those ones in green are things that are actually happening right now. Or have happened, and so they're influences that might be able to help us be more effective in addressing food security. However, you can see that there's some others that haven't really happened in a broad way, and so we need to consider that when we should be taking advantage of them and making innovations around them. Sally and Leanne talked about the food environment previously in the second seminar webinar, and they talked about convenience stores in the most deprived areas being at 12.7 for the convenience stores. For the same area in the least deprived areas, it was 4.5 convenience stores. So a massive difference in terms of the food environment. Those fast food outlets on the right hand side here, most deprived areas had 13.7 fast food outlets. For the same area, the least deprived had 3.7. So when you're being influenced by your environment, this is the kind of things that you're left to be able to purchase your food from. So it makes a massive influence on where and how you buy your food. Again, in the middle there, talking about supermarkets for every meter of unhealthy food, the most deprived areas had 0.38 meters of healthy food, and the least deprived had 0.44. So there's been not much work being done in terms of the supermarkets, and that's a big influence because those conventional food systems are where we get our food in the main part. So one of the factors was to increase minimum, sorry, I'll just go back again, increase minimum wage. So minimum wage has actually increased already this year to $18.9 an hour, and is actually looking to be increased to $20 an hour based on the Labor government's election promise. Now, that's all very well. That's fantastic, increasing the minimum wage. But one of the issues that comes with that is that what if you're already redundant? What if you're already unemployed? unemployed. So that's not really going to make a difference for you in terms of being able to be food secure. So it needs to be across the board. So one of the alternatives that we have is a universal basic income. Now, there's lots of controversies about this, whether we can afford to do this or what kind of impact will it truly have. And there have been pilots around the world. The problem with that is they've been heterogeneous. So that they've had different types of UBIs. So it's really hard to know what will work best here in New Zealand until it's been put in place. But what we've found so far, based on the evidence, is that it offers a way to reduce income inequality. So it will raise the bar in terms of having that safety net for everyone. So basically, anyone who was working, not working, who's an adult of working age will be able to get this UBI. Now, it's not going to be enough to be able to go traveling overseas on. It's quite low levels, but it will be enough to be able to help someone through the worst of their times. There has multiple forms, and then each of those forms have different policies that sit alongside them. So it's really difficult to say, what needs to be done with a UBI in terms of, does tax go up, income tax go up, or does it go down? All these kinds of things we don't know. One positive thing that might come from this is that because it's such a low level anyway, that that money can only be spent locally, really to be able to get that person to be food secure. So the great news is it stays within the economy. And so therefore, we're not going to lose out in that respect. It addresses unemployment, because even if you're unemployed, you get the UBI. If you're employed, you get the UBI in the form of tax breaks. It does encourage work, because it's not a living wage, so it's not necessarily a way to be able to get live very comfortably for the rest of your life unemployed. So it doesn't encourage people not to work. The problem with a UBI is that it requires political will and also other resources to be able to manage it. And it's been a difficult one for any government to be able to put in place. Second one is fringe lender responsibility. So what this is in the local community, there are lenders that go out there for small cash loans, usually at a higher interest rate than what banks would rely on, but they have less credit requirements for those lenders. Now, the one thing that Signal et al. Have asked about is more responsibility from those fringe lenders. So we have our credit contracts in our Consumer Finance Act from 2003. It has a responsible lending code from 2017. There's now licensed financial advice providers required from the 15th of March of this year. So there have been things being put in place that might actually help. I'm against fringe lenders personally and professionally, and the reason why it's this kind of work, this kind of resource perpetuates these poverty-related inequalities. So they will just get into debt with someone else, and it doesn't make you food secure necessarily. So this is part of the problem, is that we've got to think about how could they actually help. But they are one form of resource that could be used in the community. The provision of food in schools. Now we have seen our Labor government funding school lunches, and so that aims to reduce food insecurity. And by this year, past September, over 1 million lunches have been served in 64 schools to 13,700 students. The USDA National School Lunch Program also states that they reduce food insecurity. However, my question about this is that it's a stopgap measure, because it only partially addresses food insecurity of the student. So there's the individual rather, and that's within the school term. So unless the school lunches can go through the school holidays and feed those students, then it's not really going to address the food insecurity that's happening in the household to a extensive level. And then also what's happening with the household. So those whānau there, how are they being fed? How are they being able to contribute to society when they're not being able to access kai? Cooking and budgeting skills. This is a basic one that's been around for a few decades now. There's many Māori organisations that actually do this, and it's a fantastic thing to do. And so, you know, the Bay of Plenty DHB have their healthy cooking, healthy lifestyle program that was based on the previous HIHA that Sally and Leanne talked about. The good thing is it does help food insecurity in the form of helping people being able to adjust their diet so they can be able to get nutritious meals, but at a low cost. So that's the fantastic thing about it. However, it doesn't address insufficient income. So if you don't have enough money to be able to budget, and those are some of the people that I've come across that just don't have the cash to be able to spend on any food. And then sometimes the household expenses such as rent are taking up so much of their income that things like fruit and vegetables are being squeezed out, even the cheapest ones. Community markets and gardens are a common go-to for communities for the past decade or so. And unfortunately, the problem with them is sustainability and equity issues, even though they have great positive things about them, such as community cohesion, being able to get outside, physical activity, fresh food. It's really good in that respect. But unfortunately, they're reliant on capacity, so people, volunteers normally, and then also resources to be able to upgrade their garden. It is a culturally acceptable option for Māori. We have marakai, we've done it for centuries, so certainly that is a great thing. But again, sustainability is difficult to find. So what Signal Weto have asked is to trial in low-income areas, and if not feasible, then try those subsidised delivery boxes. But again, subsidised by whom? How is that done? There's again sustainability issues in terms of financial and economic aid. So community-based initiatives. So these are things like food rescue, and in New Zealand, that's done really well. They've really picked up and are doing a fantastic job to avoid waste, food waste, and also to feed whānau. The great thing about it is that even though most of the time that they're volunteer-based, the multi-focus on food security and also environmental, so trying to avoid food waste is really good too. So that's the bonus with this kind of initiative, is to be able to have volunteers that it suits their volunteer value system, so they can draw on those two bodies of values. Here, I think that social enterprise might be a solution. So businesses run with a values-based system, and food cooperatives are one way of doing it. So getting a group of people together to buy in bulk, to buy cheaper food, is certainly one way of doing this. It requires coordination, and usually, again, it requires volunteers. But what we're trying to look at now is we're contemplating trying to install a local food system that is pay fair trade to our primary producers, but we are the middle person to be able to deliver to our local community. So it will be run on a not-for-profit type of scenario where any profits are fed back into the system to be able to either feed whānau that can't feed themselves or are unable to feed themselves, or excess food is shifted to those whānau. So trying to use the economy for itself, and keep that money within the economy, keep it local and support our primary producers. Another way to be able to raise money for food security is through taxes and levies, and to have people who do purchase unhealthy foods to be able to bear some of the cost. So one way that has been recommended is sugar and fat taxes. And that's certainly a great way to go about trying to alleviate the pressure that is on low socioeconomic communities. One of the issues I have with it, though, is we don't talk about where this money goes. So so if we are to put a sugar tax on, that tax money needs to be put to interventions that are going to improve food security. That's really important, because if low socioeconomic communities are more likely to say drink sugar sweetened beverages, then they're going to bear the cost, and so it's not going to be equitable in terms of tax. So the food insecurity, so the tax money needs to be moved into food security to be able to support those whānau. Again, alcohol, another levy on that. We have very cheap alcohol in New Zealand. We don't need to have it as cheap as it is, and so moving that, adding another levy on that to be able to help food insecurity would be a great thing. Property tax. Now, there's all kinds of capital gains tax and things like that that might be helpful. Property tax to be able to lessen the housing crisis that we have at the moment. The housing prices are crazy compared to the rest of the world, and we need to be able to balance that to be able to get families living in livable homes. And then should income tax be raised to be able to help food insecure families? That's another question that needs to be raised. So with all those things that are happening, there's these ones in red, full benefit entitlements from WINS, full food industry role. So how does the food industry contribute to food security? And then removing GST from healthy food is another way to be able to address food insecurity. You notice that healthy food subsidies and traditional Māori food sources, well, traditional Māori food sources are happening at the moment, but they're to a very low level, not as highly resourced as what they should be. So we're hoping that iwi and hapu are more able to be able to access those grounds and look after those grounds to be katiakitanga. And then the healthy food subsidies, we're hoping that we can be able to, well, we are getting that at the moment through this through those school lunches. Just a quick overview of the work that we've done around food security so far. I just wanted to finish off with this. Back in 2018, we undertook a study with 40 households in a high deprivation community, so a community living in high deprivation. If you can see here, this blue box within the community, dark purple is where there is very high deprivation, and this blue box is corresponding to the blue line on the right hand side, and that blue line is indicating that it's the third most is a community living in the third most highest deprivation in New Zealand. So it was a very high deprivation area that we were working with. 65% of the households had income less than $20,000 a year. So that's the total household income. 50% were renting and 45% were state housing. So I'm not sure how they afforded to have market rents at less than $20,000 a year in total household income. It's quite amazing. So in this intervention, for 3 months, we delivered free fruit and vegetables to them, enough for 5+ a day, for each member of the household. And then for another 3 months, we've supplied them with as much fruit and vegetables as they could buy in $5 bags. So each $5 bag had just over 20 serves of fruit and vegetables in it. At the baseline, we didn't deliver any food at baseline, so before the intervention started. So there were 0 serves of fruit and vegetables delivered, and so we didn't observe any fruit and vegetables being consumed. They reported, though, that they consumed 2.1 serves a day of fruit and 2.6 serves a day of vegetables. So you would think that that would be quite, that's not too bad. It's almost 5+ a day. And then when we look at the intervention, we delivered 2.1 serves per day and 4.2 serves of vegetables per day for each member of the household, for 40 households. And then we observed them consuming 1.8 serves a day, so almost 2 serves a day, and more than 3+ vegetables serves a day. In their self-report, so this is the kind of question that Ministry of Health would ask about how many serves of vegetables have you consumed in the last week. They said that they ate 2.4 serves a day and vegetables were 2.4 serves a day. So this was, the vegetable consumption was actually less than at baseline, even though we delivered 4 serves of vegetables a day. So what that told us was that people aren't very good at estimating how much fruit and vegetables they consume. If we look at portions of food here, we observed them consuming 86% of the fruit that was delivered to them and 93% of the vegetables that were delivered to them. So that's pretty good. I think that, you know, in terms of trying to meet 5+ a day, we know that now that communities living in high deprivation want to eat fruit and vegetables. The issue is that we've got barriers for them to be able to access those fruit and vegetables. If they have it at their front door, delivered to their front door, they will consume it. So this is great news for us. It means that any intervention that we do, we have a greater chance of people consuming more serves of fruit and vegetables. Now the issue is, how do they afford it? Now the problem of measuring food is where we're trying to go now with our next study. This is happening at the start of next year. So looking at following their food consumption with wearable cameras, smartphones, and observing them again, and then asking them about a 24-hour recall. So the 24-hour recall is the kind of standard looking for their fruit and vegetable consumption. We'll do a baseline without any food intervention, and then do a free food intervention after that. So 3 weeks of each. Right. So we haven't got any data for you to show you, but I've come to the end of my Aotearoa now, so hopefully, have I got right on at 30 minutes, Alison?
Perfect. Thanks so much, Jeff. That's absolutely fabulous to have such a wonderful, clear overview. Jeff, I'm guessing that if you were the Prime Minister, then one of your first actions might be to increase benefits, increase minimum wage. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, well, that is part of a multi-dimensional solution. So yeah. it will never answer the problem, but it will make a good start to be able to get families food secure. But we need to have other things in place to be able to complement it, to make it more, to enhance its impact. Yeah. The income alone is not going to be able to make a big difference in terms of whānau, but food security, but it certainly will make a change to a small degree.
I think that's a really useful point for everything to do with public health, isn't it, Jeff? That actually there's not a one size fits all, and we have to tackle every issue from multiple ways with lots of different people at different levels, addressing these issues. And that's why everybody that's part of these webinars is so very important. You'll all bring your own unique take to this. One of the things, just to remind our viewers, is that you talked about a food system proposal, and the Common Unity project that you'll be aware of in Lower Hutt is a really fabulous example of that. And we might just remind people in our newsletter about that coming up. Just before we move on, we've got some questions here that we would like to answer, but I'd like to just put up a very quick poll for 1 minute. Mark, if you could just pop that up now, if you could just take a couple of seconds to answer. Have these webinars been useful? We've had 3 in this series, and this is the last in the series, looking at the 3 areas of the triangle in our latest papers. And are you satisfied with these webinars? A number of people answering there. We've got 100% of people who have learnt something new, and 66% highly satisfied, 33% satisfied, and a bit of a relief here actually to see that nobody is unsatisfied nor somewhat satisfied. So Pure, thank you for that. Let's have a look at some of the questions that have come in. I think this is a point that wasn't raised, but probably really important as part of that overall package. What about limiting points of sale of unhealthy foods in conjunction with the taxes or levies?
Yeah, so one of the things that was talked about by Signal at all, and the work that Louise is still doing, is talking about advertising and convenience stores around schools, particularly. So trying to reduce the impact of advertising and convenience to unhealthy foods to young people. So trying to have that long a lifespan approach, reducing adult obesity by focusing on rangatahi, or on younger people. So that's certainly a way to go, and local governments need to be supported by central government to be able to make their stand for limiting those fast food outlets and food being sold, particularly near schools and workplaces, trying to promote better eating. So I'm not sure about making laws about it, but certainly doing things to promote sale of healthy foods. I'm a bit up in the air about making things compulsory and allowing people to have their choice in the matter. And I think that, when there is greater choice for healthy foods, people will gravitate towards the healthy foods. It's just that we have so many unhealthy foods being sold that it's kind of, saturating the food market. That's the part of it.
Thanks, Jeff. That's interesting. What do you think about free versus cheaper food? Does providing free fruit and vegetables devalue them and make them not as attractive? Or is it really just important to increase access, meaning free equals good?
We didn't do the free fruit and vegetables study to see if that kind of system would work. What we wanted to do was to remove the barriers for access to food. So once those barriers were removed, we could see that people freely consumed fruit and vegetables. So that was the kind of philosophical answer that we wanted to have, rather than it being an actual intervention for communities. I don't believe. I think that some people might think it devalues food. Absolutely. So some people, even people who are in poverty, they think, oh, it's free, so it must be crap, or I'm just going to throw it out. So that's very possible. Absolutely. But the whānau that we were with, because we interviewed them also and asked them about that food, they said that even though we sold them really cheap, inexpensive food, they thought that it was too expensive for them. They could only buy, say, one $5 bag a week based on their cash. And that was definitely not sufficient for 5+ a day for their whānau. That they knew that it was cheaper than what they would buy at the supermarket or at the fruit and veg store. So they knew their numbers, and they could appreciate that food because it was much cheaper than what they could ever get. So I don't believe that food should be free unless you put your own work into it. You grow your own food, or you trade, barter, or pay for someone to be able to get that food. I don't believe that food should be free. It should certainly be a right to access that food. Absolutely. So you shouldn't be denied access to that food. However, that food, I don't believe food should be free. However, but then again, if you're unemployed, where are you going to get the money from to be able to buy that food? So those other things need to be in place. If we're going to say, people, you need to buy your food, well, that's fine. Provide them with the opportunities to be able to purchase that food. And that's where we have to come along.
It's interesting. When I worked in Aotearoa, one of the food banks that I was involved with, we had a deal where people, in order to get a food parcel, they would donate an hour of their time in the vegetable garden, and as part of that they would work alongside somebody else to gain the skills, but also to actually have a bit of a chat with the people in the vegetable garden, with social workers, and could actually help to empower those people to make changes. So there's quite a number of questions coming in here that I can actually see a bit of a theme around, and one of the questions, are food banks the best model, and are there other models? And I think you talked also about your complementary food system, and it would be fabulous to find out a little bit more about that, and what some of these items potentially could be. And I don't think we've got time to talk about that today, Jeff, but really keen to explore that a bit further. Just probably quite a quick question here. Has there been a more recent food security survey since 2009?
Yeah, we haven't had a nutrition survey since 2009, but we have had food security. So that information that I showed was I think it's drawn from the 2015-2016 health survey, and that's using the same food secure measures as 1997, except that I think it only does households with children. So it's the only exception, I believe. So yes, it's last 5 years, I suppose. I believe that they're looking to do another one. Ministry of Health are wanting to track it, but when it's coming out, I don't know. We'll have to ask Harriet, I suppose. Yeah.
And I guess that leads on to another question, possibly a little bit too complicated for the time we've got left, but the question says there seems to be reluctance from government to make some of the major requirements necessary for food security, and how do we as health professionals advocate more effectively to actually see some change in this space?
That's a great question. We need to put pressure on our MPs. It's basically it. We have allegedly left-wing government, but I believe that what they're going to do is be more centrist and try a middle of the road approach. So they're going to do some things that are considered to be left wing, some things they're considered to be right wing. So it's going to be a touch and go. So the biggest thing that we need to do is that all the things that I'm proposing here are not necessarily socialist or left wing. They're another way to be able to reduce the amount of people that we have that are food insecure. So the issue is that we're trying to get people to be more, to be greater, more productive for New Zealand. So I'm not just talking about money-wise, but I'm talking about socially too. And the only way we can do that is by feeding our country. And we're not doing it at the moment. That food system, as Boyd Swinburne says, the food system is broken. It is broken. There's no doubt about that. We have, 20% of children not being fed properly. That is ridiculous for a food-producing country, particularly with the amount of food that we export. So we need to put greater pressure on central government. Local government are really keen. What I've found with local government, they're really keen to support it. They don't have the resources that central government have. So, if we support our local governments to be able to undertake different projects, but then at the same time, in parallel, hit up our cabinet ministers and our MPs, even I'm sure the national MPs would be keen to be able to take this up because it's something that an opposition can do. And so, utilize that, leverage that. And that's the only way I can think we can do that. So I'm at the moment trying to work with the MPI, MB and Ministry of Social Development. They're the ones that I'm kind of targeting to be able to promote food security initiatives, health and all policies type of arrangements with them. But we do need to see our local electorate MPs, those ones there, don't worry if they're wherever they come from, whether they're Māori Party or whether they're Labour or whether they're National, it doesn't matter, or Greens, it doesn't matter, ACT even. It doesn't matter who they are, they will want the opportunity to be able to shine in this government's time and wherever they come from. So if we all band together to say we need to address food security, then I think it will be a better day for us all.
That's fantastic, Mahi, Jeff. Ngā mihi nui, and thank you very much for sharing your knowledge today. There are a number of unanswered questions here, and I can see perhaps a panel. We've got some fabulous people around the country trying some great initiatives, and we at ANA would love to share those and further this conversation. Thank you all for joining us today, and a special thanks to our guest, Jeff. Thank you. Goodbye.
Kia ora.
Ngā mihi nui.